Welcome to another episode of Truce Talks. I'm Diann, and I'm talking with Sarah Baum today. I met Sarah at a very interesting event in Scottsdale, where she was talking with a group of new moms and first-time pregnant moms about some of the situations, some of the things that might occur to them. Sarah is a therapist, a very gifted therapist, and I thought you'd be interested in some of the things she had to say. Sarah, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Diann.
Oh, what an absolute delight. I was really taken, as I mentioned to you earlier, by your talk with these women who were obviously kind of had some concerns, and you handled it so very, very well. And one of the things that I remember about you on a personal level is that you, like me, you came from California.
I did.
And you're relatively new here to the Valley. So let's talk about that for just a few minutes. You've got 3 kids. You've got a very, very intense profession. How are you doing?
You know, it's been I don't want to say a tough year, but it's been an interesting year. I moved here from Sacramento about a year ago. So I'm originally from Southern California, but transplanted to Sacramento with my husband. And we had our 3 kiddos there. I've got a 6-year-old, a 3-year-old, and a 1-year-old.
Whoa.
Yeah, it's crazy. And right as I had my last baby, my husband found out he was being transferred to Phoenix. So he came out here a few months before me. And and then we came out here. Luckily, my mom lives here in Scottsdale, so I get to be closer to family. And I love it here so far. The weather is great. You know, the heat in the summer isn't all that different than the heat in Sacramento, so it's been fun.
I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, I hear people talk all the time about the heat. I'm from Bakersfield, Central Valley of California. I would rather have the heat than be shoveling snow any day.
Absolutely. I'm a snow person on a short vacation, but not to live there.
Your specialty, getting back to the topic at hand, your specialty, your expertise is really working with women who are dealing with issues of anxiety, postpartum anxiety, and postpartum depression. Can you tell me a little bit about how you approach that issue?
I think the transition to motherhood is one that is a huge shift for women. I feel like it's so difficult sometimes to realize how much your life truly does change, and our identities change. I didn't have my first child till I was 34, so I had lived a whole life before then. And so shifting my priorities, my responsibilities, my identity as a career person, as a therapist. I've been licensed as a therapist for over 10 years now, and I've worked in mental health almost my whole career. I started at a shelter for teens when I was 21 years old. So mental health has always been near and dear to my heart. And so shifting from taking care of all of these people in the outside world to taking care of the people in my own world can be really difficult. And a lot of women don't know how much the shift will affect them. And then having this little person who is totally reliant on you causes a lot of feelings. And some is normal. Like there is, baby blues,
Right, baby blues. How is that different from the actual anxiety and or depression? That's a normal phase that sort of passes?
Yeah, so baby blues can be really normal for a lot of new moms. And that's part of that shift, right? Yeah. Shifting what your life looks like. And sleep deprivation has a lot to do with that. When you are tired, you feel more feelings. You have more difficulty coping with things that are normal sometimes. But when it becomes overwhelming and pervasive, that's when it can become the diagnosable, which is postpartum depression or postpartum anxiety. Mm-hmm. And that's when it's time to talk to your doctor, to talk to a therapist, to really pull your circle in of support and look at what's going on.
And does it happen? Just a curious question. I don't have children. Does it happen with every child? Or does it only happen, is it really concentrated with the first child?
No, it can happen with any child. It can happen with your first child. It cannot happen until your fourth child. It's really just a perfect storm of hormones and situations and life. And there's really no way to account for what is going to push it into a diagnosable postpartum depression or anxiety. There's no real, like, this is what causes it. Mm-hmm. But there are some conditions that make you more susceptible to postpartum depression. And one of those is a mental illness that's occurring before your pregnancy. So if you're already diagnosed with depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, those things, then you are more likely to have postpartum issues with those conditions.
Do medical doctors, obstetricians, gynecologists, do they know this? Is this part of their training in dealing with a newly pregnant woman, sort of giving them a little heads up, or do they not, aren't they unfamiliar with it?
So it's really cool because there's a shift recently. I would say probably in the last 5 years. So my oldest is 6. So I remember with her going in for my postpartum, or, postpartum in the sense post-pregnancy appointments, they didn't do anything. They didn't ask me any questions. They checked, my body, and then they let me go.
Yeah.
And since that, so I know with my 3-year-old and my 1-year-old, they're now asking questions. So they are now shifting. So at your pediatrician appointments and your OB appointments, they're starting to ask questions like, are you sleeping? Mm-hmm. Are you having any intrusive thoughts? So thank goodness doctors in the medical community are making a shift to ask more, because there was a time not so long ago that medical doctors, like your post-birth doctor's appointment for the mom, they didn't ask anything. It was almost as if you didn't matter. It's just the baby. The focus is on the baby. If your body is okay, then we'll send you on your way. So I'm really happy about that shift that's happening, where you are having to do the questionnaire before you go in, asking about sleep and mood and intrusive thoughts and racing thoughts and, compulsion type behaviors. So they're asking that now. Those are questionnaires that are given. So that's really cool, I think.
Do you think that women know when they're over the line of anxiety into the area of serious anxiety and needing help? How long do you think it takes them to identify it? At what point do you see them?
So for me, by the time they get to my office, I think most moms are like 3 months along. Like 3 to 6 months is when people are coming to therapy. But I think that there's that kind of disconnect between what's normal and what's not. Is this normal?
Yeah.
And there's still such a stigma about mental health in this world, that you can't say, like, I'm really struggling. And I do think this is an evolution. I do think that things are changing. There are now a real push for these mom groups. So back in California, Kaiser had it. Kaiser offered for 1 year after your baby was born, Thursday mornings from 10 to 2, you come with your baby and you sit in a circle with other moms, and you don't have to be there on time, and you can walk in at any point, and there is some sort of educated lactation consultant, whatever she was, that would sit and kind of run this group. But you could sit and you could cry and you could breastfeed, or you could bottle feed, and you could change your baby's diaper, but whatever, for the first year. And I'm seeing more of these groups grow. So here in Arizona, I know that there's a group called the Motherhood Co., and they've got these mom groups. I talked to a woman, I think at Banner Hospital, and she does a mother group. So for the first year of life, you can sit in this circle with other moms and talk about what's going on, so you know that you're not alone. And I think that that's the most important thing for moms, in terms of realizing, like, is this a problem or not, is to find out what other moms are doing and how they're feeling, and kind of doing that check-in, because it can be very isolating.
That's what I heard from some of the women at the Moms Night Out event that we were at. They were talking about feeling very, very isolated, very alone. They're home all day by themselves with this new fragile baby, and when their husbands come home at night, yeah, that's a little relief, but they can't sleep. They're so wired into it. And you handle those situations so beautifully with, you know what, you're not alone.
Yes.
And that's what they need to hear. You're not alone.
Absolutely.
But when it trips over, among is when it seems to get sort of scary. And I was doing some reading, obviously, about it, and they were talking about the role of diet. That you also have to think about changing perhaps what you're eating for the sake of the child, but for yourself as well.
And you have to eat more frequently, too. And I think that that's really hard. There are so many, memes and funny things on the internet about, like, moms not having enough time to even eat. But it's really important. That's something that I sometimes do for my friends who become moms is snacks. Go to Costco and grab the boxes of Nutri-Grain bars and the boxes of mixed nuts, because moms don't have enough time to even eat themselves sometimes, or something my mom did for me when I first had my first child was she had this big basket, like a big basket, and in it was diapers and wipes and bibs and anything that I might need, and snacks, bottles of water. And then wherever I was stationed on the couch, you just plop that down, and then you don't have to get up and go anywhere. You can sit with your baby and you have access to everything, because those little babies fall asleep on your chest. And as a new mom, you're just like, I can't get up.
Right.
I don't want to disturb the baby. I don't want to go anywhere. And so if you have your snacks and your water next to you, you get to eat. You get to nourish your own body, which is so important.
Remember we met also the woman from Mashka, which is a company that is providing nutrient supplements for new moms. This is brand new as well.
Yes.
Reaching out to that population saying, you need as much care as your baby needs.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's saying, like, you can't pour from an empty cup. If you don't have energy, if you don't have what you need, you can't give to your baby. And then if you're having your second baby, that's a whole nother can of worms, because how do you take care of a toddler and take care of a baby? And that's when, like, this anxiety and depression and feelings of not being enough start to come in. And I wanted to talk about, in postpartum anxiety, the difference between what's normal and what's not normal. So the normal anxiety is the adaptive anxiety, and this is that ingrained kind of, very primal, like, I worry that my baby will fall off the couch. I worry that my baby, what if this happens? What if my baby, chokes? What if? The what ifs are the normal. When it becomes abnormal is the obsessions. Like, if I'm not holding my baby, then they will be sick, then they will die, then they will be hurt. If I don't do this, then this will happen. Obsessive compulsion disorder outside of maternal health is really doing these patterns and rituals in order to keep the bad thing from happening. And so that's what new moms do. They create this kind of obsessive thinking that if they don't hold their baby all the time, then something bad will happen. If they're not in control all the time, something bad will happen. So that's a kind of difference in anxiety between what's adaptive and what's obsessive.
That has to absolutely chew your brain up. Mm-hmm. You have to be really, really sleep deprived if you're working on that level.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. In my practice, I joke a lot about the monkey chatter. Our brains just do all the time. There's just always thoughts. We're always thinking. And it's hard to turn that off. And when it becomes a more clinically significant level of anxiety, it's so much worse. The normal person has a lot of thoughts, like, what if this happens? And, just thinking as they go about their day. But when you have a clinically significant level of anxiety, those thoughts are so loud and they eclipse anything else that's going on, and it just becomes unbearable.
And panic attacks are a part of that as well. I would think that would accompany the whole anxiety thing, that it moves beyond anxiety into panic attacks.
Mm-hmm. And panic attacks are scary because you feel like you're dying.
Yeah.
For somebody who's never had a panic attack, it's hard to imagine, but it's a physiological phenomenon. People feel like I've had clients who have come in and said, I called 911 and I went to the hospital because I thought I was having a heart attack. And it's that body, that your flight or fight chemicals just become so elevated that your body is actually reacting to your thoughts. And it's really, panic attacks are so awful. I tell my clients a lot, and being from California, you'll appreciate this. It's like body surfing, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you're swimming in the ocean and you're swimming against the waves, it's rough and you get dunked and the wave crashes on you and it's awful. But if you turn around and you body surf and you ride the wave in, it will be over. So when you're having a panic attack, that's something I like my clients to think about. Is don't fight it. Don't actively think about how bad you need it to stop. Write it in because it will end. That makes sense?
Wow. Yes, it does. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Because we spend so much time in general denying a lot of things that are going on with us, whether we're connected to a baby or a pregnancy. We spend a lot of time in denial.
Mm-hmm.
And to just let it roll.
Yeah.
And see where it takes you. That's
breathe into it.
That's huge.
Know that it will not last forever and that you won't die from it. I know that sounds very simple, but nobody has died from a panic attack. But when you're in it, you feel like you're going to die, and then you're fighting, and then it's trying to control your body. And the more you work to try to control your body in an aggressive manner, trying to confront it, it's like swimming into the wave.
Yep.
But when you recognize, I'm just going to breathe through this, it will be over, and kind of go with it.
That is a great analogy with the water.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a person who's frightened of the water. I don't swim well. I'm never going to be that person out in the wave because I'm absolutely terrified. And so it's true. I've learned over the years, because I do go in the ocean and stuff, just stay with the flow of the water. Don't fight the water.
Yeah.
Because that's a way to panic.
Absolutely.
And I think to this day, that's why I'm afraid of the water. I had a panic attack as a child in the water. And it's done. It's done.
And our brain is crazy that way. You talked about, you think it's from that childhood experience. It was bad. Hebb's law is that neurons that fire together wire together. So the fact that you had this panic attack as a child and it still really goes with you as an adult is because you wired your brain to have that reaction. But because we have neuroplasticity, there's ways that you can also train your brain to wire and fire differently.
Your background is really, really interesting. I love I'm a scientist on the other end of things, but to hear the scientist in you talking about this, it's really just most exciting. When you went to school, did you know you were going to be focusing on these issues? Where did you start out with your training as a therapist?
So I was in Southern California and I went to Pepperdine. And, for anybody who is thinking about being a therapist, the thing is they don't teach you anything about business in graduate school for therapy. So they give you all of these great tools and you think you're just going to leave, graduate school and hang up your shingle and be a therapist, but you have no idea how to be a business person. And so a lot of therapists end up doing agency work, which is what I did for many, many years. And I started at a shelter in Los Alamitos, California, and I worked with teens, homeless teens. And it was such an amazing place. The founder, Mildred Jones, was in her 90s. And she was the first female lieutenant in the Navy. And she marched with Martin Luther King, and she marched with Cesar Chavez, and her love died in World War I or II, I don't know. And so she never remarried, and she dedicated her life to helping what she called throwaway children. So she was one of my very early mentors for what it means to be a helper.
Wow. I believe I've heard of her. She's very well known.
Yes, she was amazing. And she built this shelter in the 70s and built her home next door. And she would come over and have dinner with the children every night and talk to them and talk about their lives. And she was just inspiring. So I worked there from when I was 21 to 24. I got some certifications in things like domestic violence prevention. So I would teach teenage girls about what the red flags were for domestic violence and how to kind of stop those relationships before they start. And then I spent a long time working with children. So I did community mental health in Long Beach and Compton and Watts when I was, in my early 20s and resilient. And then I worked in education for a long time. in special ed.
Mm-hmm.
And then in moving to Arizona, I realized that education, although I loved it and I loved that population, it's a different world in Arizona from California. And so I decided it was time to become a businesswoman.
And what steps have you taken in that direction?
So I found a lovely woman, Sheila Shervy. She's my business partner in some senses of the word. Excuse me. And she is amazing in the sense that the small world of that. We both went to Pepperdine University in California. We both have lived in Hawaii and Seattle. We both were married in November. We both have March babies that are of the same year. So we have tons in common. And she had established her business here. And she really took me under her wing and showed me how to do the business side of therapy. So I've been a therapist for a very, very long time. But I never had a private practice because the idea of starting my own business is very daunting. That's not my strength. It's still not my strength, you know. But I have help now. I've hired people like accountants and somebody helps me with my billing, which is great. So I can really focus on the work and the meat, which is working with women in all areas of their life. Postpartum anxiety and depression and new moms are so near and dear to my heart. But another thing that I'm really running into is that women have unhealthy relationships with their mothers. So to put it in a way that I don't like to say it, but the clearest possible way is toxic moms. Mm-hmm. So adult women who have these unhealthy relationships with their mom, and that's like 50% of my practice right now. And working through the trauma. You hear all the time about girls with daddy issues, and I don't like that phrase either, but it's so much more common. But nobody talks about the lasting wounds that women can have from having moms that are unhealthy, their own moms. And that comes into then when they're having their children, the intergenerational traumas of parenting is really interesting.
Trying to correct what you have identified as the mistakes, the pain that mother caused. I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do something much better. And that becomes another real pressure, I would think.
Yes. And there's also something beautiful happening in my practice now where I have clients who are the mothers that are recognizing their roles in their children. Like the mothers who have children and recognizing as, you know, an older adult that they have done wrong and really going back and trying to correct and change and shift and heal those relationships too. And it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful.
It's like ripples in a pool, kind of going out, out, all the things that can be affected if changes aren't made, if things aren't recognized. And I think that's the hard part too. Recognizing that you have a problem, recognizing that your mother wasn't perfect. A lot of people need a lot of help getting over that.
And it's never too late. I hear people say like, oh, it's too late for therapy for me. I'm too old for therapy. Like, I'm so set in my ways. It is never too late.
No, it's not.
It's never too late.
You know what I used to tell people, because I'm a supporter and believer in the power of therapy, you're being given a set of tools. If you're going to build a house, you need tools. You can't just wish it into place. You need tools. And therapy provides the client with the tools to deal with the issue in a talking, supportive environment.
Absolutely. There's a phrase called self-actualization, but it's not a place, it's a journey. You know, I don't think that we ever truly arrive there. I think that the word is more about how we're constantly striving to be better, because if we stopped growing, we might as well just die, right? I mean, we should always be learning and growing and evolving and changing and bettering ourselves. It shouldn't be a stopping point.
And it's so funny, you hear about people who retire, and within a year they've died because there is nothing there. They've had nothing beyond the job or nothing beyond that spouse. You hear of husband and wives who die within 6 months of each other. And I think we all need that self-actualization to reach out what's beyond our lives that we're not seeing now, directions we can go. Because it's a lifetime trip. You don't get to sit in the rocking chair anymore.
No.
Not if you got your wits about you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And learning and growing. And there's always something to learn. My grandfather, before he died, he was in his 80s and he was taking classes on religion. You know, he wanted to know more about the religions in the world. Yeah. You know, and that's really cool, I think, you know, constantly striving to know more.
In terms of postpartum depression, getting back to your specialties, it's taking, you're saying, about 3 months for your clients to recognize that they have anxiety. Is it about the same time frame for them to recognize postpartum depression? And there have been some interesting books being written, even by people like Brooke Shields wrote a book about her experience. I think that woke a lot of women up. It's like, hey, you know, celebrities experience this as well.
Absolutely. And I think that's part of this shift in like talking more about it and mental health and being more aware of things. There's more celebrities that are talking about their experiences with it. There's more people writing books about it. Yeah. There's the mom groups. There's, you know, the moms night outs that I try to go to. I also write for Scottsdale Mom's blog. And I try to write every month when I turn in my submission. I want it to be geared towards the struggles that moms are going through. And oftentimes, honestly, that comes from the struggles that I'm going through. So whatever I am struggling with that month becomes my topic, becomes my blog for the month. And one of my posts a few months back was how anxiety in motherhood really becomes anger. So as a mom of 3, I find myself getting angry. And I'm a therapist, and I know all the things that I am supposed to be doing. I just want to dispel the fact that, like, I'm a perfect mom or my kids are perfect, because they are nowhere close to it. And I'm human at the beginning of the day, or at the end of the day, too. And I find myself, in the mornings especially, I am angry. And it's anxiety. It's that anxiety to get my kids to school on time. It's the anxiety to make sure that their lunch is nutritious enough. And this is the more normal anxiety. Right. But it oftentimes can manifest as rage and anger. And that's hard for me as a therapist who sits all day with these lovely women and tells them all these things that they can do. And we talk and explore. And then at home, I am the victim of the same problems that my clients have.
Which makes you far more effective in talking to them, understanding what they're going through. You know, I've been there, you know, I've worn those shoes.
I'm doing it. I screamed at my kids this morning too. I say that at least once a week when my clients come in tears because they've yelled. And I tell them, we're human, we yell. But the most effective thing you can do when you've lost your temper with your children is apologize to them. And to teach them about apology. I find that in the last generation, moms didn't apologize. If they did something wrong, you know, I'm the parent, you're the child, that kind of, you know, motto. But now, if we can teach our kids that it's okay to yell, or it's not, no, let me rephrase that. If we can teach our kids that when we lose our temper or we do something wrong, that we can come back and have those corrective moments, we teach them how to be compassionate. We teach them about apology. We teach them about forgiveness. And I think that that's so important. So on those mornings that are rough with me and I've yelled at my kids for, you know, looking at the butterfly outside instead of putting their shoes on when we need to be at the door, then on my drive in, I'm like, hey guys, I'm really sorry. Mom lost her cool this morning and I don't like to do that. And I'm really sorry for yelling at you.
I'm like, okay, sorry. Mom. Is incredibly powerful in so many contexts. Acknowledging that it was wrong and you're really sorry. It's powerful to say that. Probably more powerful than just to walk away and ignore it.
I always try really hard to come back and have those corrective moments with my kids, because I have the mom anxiety. I have the mom rage. You know, I do all the things that I tell my clients to do, and yet I still have those moments where I'm just a human. But I think the powerful thing is to be able to teach children language for feelings, teach children language for humility, forgiveness, kindness, compassion. When you teach and give them examples of that, that's when I feel like I'm going to raise better kids than, maybe I was raised or that the previous generations did, because I want to be in tune with their feelings. And I think that that's, really important.
You're a very amazing woman, Sarah, and it's been just such a pleasure talking to you. So what I'd like to do is to wind up with our questions that we like to ask everyone, which is, number one, what are you reading?
What am I reading? Oh, so I just finished a book, and it's called You Should Talk to Somebody by Lori Gottlieb.
I loved that book.
Oh, my God.
Oh, yeah.
It's so amazing.
I do the audio because I'm driving a lot.
It's not just for therapists. It is this wonderful dichotomy between her experience as a client in therapy and then her experience as a therapist. It is a great read for anybody.
What are you currently streaming on television, if you have time with 3 kids to view?
Oh my goodness. Junk, really, honestly. I'm watching this, I think it's a British show on Netflix called The Stranger. It's like a psychological thriller, and this woman knows something about these people. So every episode she confronts somebody about this information that she knows. It's interesting. It's trash, though. I mean, it's not. It's good, but
it takes your mind off your mind.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And if you could have dinner with anyone, living or dead, anyone, who would you want to have dinner with?
Oh my gosh, that's such a great question. I don't know. Can I have more? Can I have a dinner party? There's so many people.
No, one
just
person.
One.
Anyone.
Oh my goodness.
Past, present, future, gone.
You know who pops into my head is Barack Obama.
That's very interesting. He's popped in a number of people's heads.
I just feel like his experience has been so unique. And he and Michelle have gone through life with such grace and compassion, especially against everything that has been thrown against them. That I think that, that's the first name.
I've been talking with Sarah Baum, who is just a most gifted therapist, and it's a pleasure to know her. And it's been a wonderful conversation. I want to thank you so very much for talking with us. And thank all of you who are listening for listening to another of Truce Talks. Please take time to give us a review. You're the reason we're making this podcast, and we can only get better with your help. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you next time. We'll be talking again.
Thank you so much for listening to another episode of Truce Talks. We're really grateful that we got to work with Sarah to help get the word out about all the positivity she's spreading in our local community. I found it really interesting to hear how the medical community is now shifting towards worrying about mental health as well as the physical health of both the child and the mother. And it's a really positive message now that's being spread in these local moms groups and businesses and things like that around self-care. It seems to be really helping the clients that Sarah has. And her story was fascinating about how she originally moved from working in an agency to now owning her own business and dealing with the struggles of that. It was really great to get a whole mix of ideas in today's conversation, and we really appreciate you listening to this episode. So please, if you have the time, give us a review. We want to make sure that we're making content that you want to hear, and the only way we can do that is through your feedback. And with that, have a great day.